decision. And now coming to the things that you mentioned just before, the corporate social responsibility and the sustainable development goals and so on. And all these are trends that have already been in the corporate world for well over 10 years. And I've noticed that they are quite ineffective and unsatisfactory. And I can also pretty much, I think I can pinpoint why that is. All these concepts, by the way, the next thing, what we did at Pfizer recently was a sustainability report, which also contains all those ethical parts. So there's always going to be a new way of putting it, and maybe some new priorities, but unfortunately, on a systemic level, it's always the same. And what is it? It is this function of corporate ethics, corporate responsibility, social responsibility is always located at the public relations level. And the public relations level is really in an extended marketing function in many contexts. So is it close to the management? Yes, public relations is normally very close to management from an organizational perspective. So you normally have the leader, the general manager, and then the public relations will be directly allotted to this person, and with very, very direct influence. But does it have to do with the actual leadership? Absolutely not. It is just a function that really is public relations. It is a communication function to the outside, and it has nothing to do with actually putting these things and making them reality on the inside. Obviously, once you see the report and you see, okay, you're really doing a bad job, then of course the motivation for management will be to do this or the other thing to make it look better. But that's really the motivation, to make it look better. And that is actually now, if you allow me, I would like to make the next point.
Can I just jump in, because don't forget your thought.
Yes.
I want to concur with you. I actually had interviewed a couple different candidates that I knew that I wanted to bring to the podcast to talk about this subject. And I have a friend and a colleague of mine that was in my executive MBA with me from Carlson Business School. And she had a very important position. She was basically responsible for corporate social responsibility and ESG within her organization. She will remain unnamed, and her company will remain unnamed. And when I approached her and I talked to her about my idealistic understanding of how great I think SDGs are and what this third level of evaluation, because you mentioned beforehand what we partly do. You mentioned, and I want to point this out. You said one of the reasons why we need to have ethics in business is because you believe there's a link to profitability. And the profitability might not be short-term, but it's definitely midterm or long-term, because what it does, it creates the speed of trust. Speed means more efficiency in delivering. It's more a stakeholder engagement, which means more people are benefiting from it. That you're building trust. Sustainability means also economic benefits. These are all aspects that tie into this profitability. But when I talked to her about corporate or social, she was also, I don't know if it was intentionally or unintentionally cynical. I guess she wanted to set my idealistic concept of it straight. She confirmed what you said, that there were two, and this is my experience also from the clients that I work with. The corporate social responsibility department is usually run, for some reason, and I don't have a problem with it, by young women. Young, intelligent, highly educated women that maybe don't have a lot of life experience in the corporate world. It's usually a staff position, so they don't have a lot of power. They're close to the board, and their two connections that they have very strongly to are the legal department and the public relations department. Now, I don't have principally a problem with that, but public relations for me is another way of saying the propaganda department. Okay. The question is, you're trying to bend the truth often. I'm not saying that that's the way it should be, but that's often its practice. How do we make something that doesn't look so good look better? That's the public relations kind of perspective, if you do it the wrong way. And the other thing is the legal aspect. What is our legal exposure for it? And what's lacking from my perspective is this whole, why aren't we tying in whatever you call it, the Department of Business Excellence or Kaizen or continuous improvement or change? Why shouldn't those be the people that are in this thing, that are actually really people that don't just know the why, but how do we take an idealistic idea and put it put feet on the ground. So that's
actually a very important part, and it really reminds me of that problem that we find in politics, where you sometimes have bad behavior, and then the answer is the defense is, well, it's all legal. Okay.
Yeah, that's a gray area.
And compliance tells me it's fine, but that doesn't mean it's politically acceptable. That doesn't mean that you don't have
or socially acceptable. If we look at private equity, there's a lot of discussion now about how ethical is private equity.
Right.
If we look at the example of Red Lobster, if you're familiar with Red Lobster, is a restaurant chain in the United States that existed and there's a whole series of these stories, bought up by a private equity company. The company owned all of its properties, so it was fairly efficient in running its restaurants. They created shell companies that sold the property to their other sister companies, and then charged horrendous rent to the restaurant company, making it basically defunct and going into bankruptcy. And is this legal? Yeah, they can get away with it. Is it ethical? No. So I think there's a whole gray area that we should maybe talk about as well. But I interrupted you. Sorry.
There is exactly this difference between legal and ethical is, I think, pretty obvious. And I think you do very well in pointing out that it's not just a public relations function; it's also the compliance function, and that is, of course, entirely the wrong approach. And that is exactly why I think my ideas about ethical behavior in the corporate context is so important, because the key idea is that it's only possible to change something when you actually do it at the leadership level. And if you just make it look like it's at the leadership level, it's not enough. It has to be really on the leadership level. And once you go this step, you can go really, really deep, because you have to ask questions about the leaders. You have to ask about their characters. You have to ask about their values. You have to ask about their behavior, right? So, and we can come to that later. That's basically the conclusion of then how you fix it. But the main point is, and that's why we called it the Institute for Ethical Leadership. Without ethical leadership, there will be no ethics in an organization, no matter how much whitewashing you actually do with all kinds of means that are very popular nowadays. So, what is the problem? Why is it so difficult, and why haven't we made any progress in so many decades, right? Although clearly, I think many people are very honestly interested in changing this, and especially those young, ambitious women who are very well educated, who work in those functions. I mean, I really salute them. They're normally very idealistic. Some of them also very well paid, which is, by the way, which is a good thing. But
I know a whole bunch of them that also got disillusioned, had burnout, and left.
But they are being used. They're being
absolutely.
really instrumentalized by this whole thing. And that's exactly the point.